This is Lecture 8, Part 1 of 2, Foreign Films. Here's some of the key points that we're going to be discussing in today's lecture. Prior to 1914, about 30 to 35% of all films that played on American screens were imported. But this all changed with the studio system. It changed once again, however, when the consent decree of 1948 forced the studios to sell off their theater holdings. Theaters were now free to not only show independent films, but also to show foreign-made movies. When this was possible, though, very few of them opted to do this. For one thing, theater owners thought that Americans would not watch foreign language films, which required reading subtitles. Another thing was just the simple belief that American films were technically superior, and there just wouldn't be any profit in showing these movies. The film that came out that proved them wrong was Roger Vadim and God Created Woman. Here's why.
She's a force of nature.
Set in the pagan paradise of the French Riviera, swirls the fast-moving, fascinating story of a demon-driven temptress.
But in France, sexy melodramas were hardly new, and at first, audiences there ignored the film.
It was nothing. It had this young girl who pouted a lot and her clothes kept falling off, but no big deal. Then it went across the water to England. Explosion. The British loved the saucy French girls, the saucy French films. How lovely. And it was X certificate, which means you had to be a certain age to get in, so it must have been forbidden fruit. Wow!
American filmgoers raised on sexual innuendo were even more excited by the movie's raw, explicit sexuality. And box office only grew when religious groups blasted Brigitte as a creation not of God, but of the devil.
It's condemned by the Catholic Legion of Decency. It's given a C rating, which means going to it counts as a mortal sin. So it's not simply that you'll be in purgatory for a while. You are damned if you see a C-rated film.
It was sent over to the United States and came back with a tremendous success. The Americans, that's you. Thank you.
How did the foreign cinema, the films of the French New Wave, as well as other foreign films, influence the future of American cinema? The short answer is really through film schools.
Really influenced by this, all of the European films that were happening.
We had, the French and Italian New Wave, and they were trying to express new ways to write with a lens, to find a new vocabulary.
For the first time on a large scale, colleges and universities were building film schools. And since there was this great demand, academia was forced to find films that they considered worthy of serious academic pursuit. And fortunately, the New Wave film was right there at that time. Now these movies, the French New Wave movies, didn't really challenge the Hollywood box office, but it did influence a young generation of filmmakers who'd come into their own in the late 60s and 70s and would totally revolutionize the way Hollywood films were made. Now one thing I do want to tell you about, and we'll get back to as we go, is form versus content. In film, the content is usually always the script, the content is always the script, and the form is the style that the film is shot in. At this point, though, I want to introduce you to the French New Wave. The father of the French New Wave never made a film. His name was André Bazin, and he was the theorist and critic that influenced the whole movement through a magazine that he wrote called Cahiers du Cinéma, which just means Journal of Film. Key to the belief of the New Wave filmmakers was the auteur theory, and the word means author. It means one person is the creative guiding force behind a film. The first French New Wave film was Francois Truffaut's 400 Blows, but the film that was really the shot that was heard around the world, the film that introduced the world to the New Wave was Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless. And Breathless is an absolute revolution.
Avant, il y avait une seule règle. Il n'y avait qu'une seule manière, il fallait faire comme ça, et si on ne faisait pas comme ça, enfin, il y avait des gens qui protégeaient ça comme des brevets. Il y avait une franc-maçonnerie dans laquelle il fallait entrer. C'est pour ça que je ne regrette pas à bout de souffle qui a permis de...
What was so different about Breathless? Well, it wasn't the story. It really had a pretty generic plot line. The simple plot of a small-time hood on the lam who gets his in the end has been featured in probably thousands of movies. But what was different about Breathless was the way, the form it was shot in. It used jump cut edits, and jump cut edits break the rules of Hollywood, classic Hollywood narrative style editing. Jump cuts pull people out of the movie and ruin their suspension of disbelief. The proper definition for a jump cut is an error in the time-space continuum. Here's some thoughts from the director of photography and the assistant director on Breathless.
C'est imaginable de pouvoir passer, de rentrer des projecteurs à l'intérieur d'une pièce comme ça, ou alors on ne peut plus bouger. Donc c'était bien qu'il n'y ait pas la lumière. C'était plutôt un soulagement.
Qu'est-ce que c'est dingue?
C'est moi.
In that very scene, I don't think there has been much more footage shot. Godard was extremely practical about logistics. Godard, certainly, there is no doubt, has an extraordinary sensitivity, artistic sensitivity, and a great delicateness in that. At the same time, he's a very realist person, you know, in terms of shooting a film, in terms of getting a picture produced, and for the right budget and things like that.
Jean-Yves, je veux dire, c'est un personnage qui fait pas beaucoup de surplus. Il est plutôt en dessous du temps. En général, la scrupulie, il manque 10 minutes. Alors, tiens, Jean-Paul, tu prends le journal et tu vas venir le François pendant 10 minutes. Alors, on fait ça à un magasin de 300 mètres. Alors, ce qui m'a surpris le plus, moi, c'est quand ce film a été monté. Parce que je ne voyais pas du tout comme ça. Je veux dire, il y avait une espèce de brio dans la façon dont c'était monté, qui ne correspondait pas du tout au système de tournage. Je trouvais que c'était un autre ton par rapport au montage que tous les films qu'on voyait habituellement. C'est-à-dire qu'il y avait une espèce de vivacité dans le récit qu'on ne trouvait pas dans les films classiques qu'on voyait à ce moment-là. Bon, par exemple, il y a une scène sur la terrasse d'un café qui est à l'étage, où Jim discute avec un mec qui s'appelle Van Dood. Là, il y a des coupes de montage absolument fabuleuses, extraordinaires.
Francois Truffaut was the other very, very important director from this movement. Truffaut started out as the most outspokenly anti-Hollywood young director, and ironically became the most Hollywood of all the angry young men. As a matter of fact, he's probably best remembered today by American audiences for his role in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which Spielberg created as an homage to the New Wave. Alain Resnais was one of the weird exceptions to the rule of the angry young men. He was actually 10 years older than the average age of the New Wave filmmaker, and he was already working in the film business. Matter of fact, he'd already made a classic documentary called Night and Fog. And this concludes Lecture 8, Part 1.